I'm taking everything, Graham said. He smiled when he said it, as if the sentence belonged in a negotiation room instead of family court. Behind him, Owen sat with his hands folded over his cane. Caleb Morris stared at the floor. Nina Patel was beside me, making notes without looking up. Then Judge Whitaker lifted one page from the file. Mr. Ellison, before we discuss the house, I want to ask about the account ending in 4,421. Graham's smile remained in place for perhaps 2 seconds. Then his thumb stopped moving against his wedding ring. I watched that small interruption more closely than I watched his face. Graham had always been good at appearing relaxed. He could make a bad quarter sound temporary, a missed payment sound strategic, and a lie sound like something everyone else had misunderstood. The hearing had begun at 9 that morning. At 6:18, I had stood in our kitchen and counted 17 minutes before he left the house. He moved through the rooms collecting his briefcase, phone, and coat, but not once did he ask whether I was coming to court. "You'll be fine," he had said. I had poured coffee into a travel mug and watched him close the front door. The house had made its usual settling sound afterward, a soft click from the hallway vent. Now, under the judge's question, Graham finally looked at me. Not angrily. Not even fearfully. For the first time in 11 years, Graham looked at me as if I had brought someone else into the marriage. Dislike. Graham had always been the financially responsible one, at least in public. He paid the bills from the accounts I had organized, discussed investments using numbers I had checked, and told people I was better with details than he was. Our house sat on a quiet street in Indiana, where the neighbors knew our cars, and the mail carrier left packages beneath the same porch chair. At home, the arrangement was less flattering to him. I tracked the insurance renewals, reconciled the statements, and kept copies of anything that involved a signature. Graham called that habit unnecessary. I called it remembering. He moved out on a Tuesday in October, taking 2 suitcases and the framed photograph from our first anniversary. 6 weeks later, he filed for divorce. His petition described me as someone who had contributed little to the marriage and understood almost nothing about our finances. He requested the house, both vehicles, his brokerage accounts, and any assets solely controlled by either party. That last phrase stayed with me. If Graham believed I had no understanding of our finances, why was he concerned about assets controlled by either of us? I read the sentence 3 times, then placed the petition beside the coffee maker and let the kettle finish boiling. Nina Patel met me the following afternoon, in a small office with frosted glass and a clock that ran 4 minutes fast. She asked what I had kept. "Statements," I said. "Closing documents, tax records." "How far back?" 7 years. She looked at me for a moment, then opened a legal pad. Nina did not ask whether I had found money. She asked whether I had found a pattern. I started with the statements from September 2023, when Graham sold the Maple Ridge commercial property. He had described the sale as disappointing. According to him, the buyers had negotiated hard, the repairs had cost more than expected, and there had been no meaningful profit. I believed him because I had no reason then to separate his explanations from the rest of our life. The records gave me a different story. Every 48 hours after a commission or property payment entered Graham's business account, a transfer left it. The amounts varied, the timing did not. I marked each one in blue ink and counted 14 matching transfers before I stopped for coffee. Lydia Chen had once supervised me during an internal audit that has nearly destroyed our department. She knew why I saved everything. "Make copies before you start asking questions," she told me over the phone. "I'm not asking questions yet. That's usually when people should." I opened the digital folder labeled Maple Ridge. The first pages showed the purchase agreement, inspection notes, and a closing statement with several figures blacked out by the scan. The final page was missing. Not blurred. Not damaged. Missing. I checked the paper file in the hallway cabinet, then the external drive, then the backup folder I had created 7 years earlier. The same gap appeared in all 3 places. At the bottom of the transfer list, I found a payment for $184,600 that had been divided into smaller amounts before disappearing from the account. I printed the page and placed it beneath my hand. The missing page was not proof of a hidden account. It was proof that someone had expected me to look for one. Nina obtained the records through discovery 3 days before the hearing. Graham's sworn statement was short. He denied having any interest in Cedar Vale Holdings and described the company as belonging entirely to his father, Owen. He also stated that he had never controlled an account connected to the company. I read the statement twice. The mailing address for Cedar Vale was Owen's address, but the bank record showed that Graham had been added to the account ending in 4,421 as an authorized signer. The account held $63,000 when the records were produced. So the money is his, I said. Not automatically, Nina replied. But the denial is now a problem. She explained that an authorized signer was not necessarily an owner. Graham could argue that he had only been helping his father manage the account. What he could not easily explain was why he had denied any connection to the company, the account, and the transactions moving through it. Nina placed the statements beside the closing records from Maple Ridge. The transfers totaled $184,600. I recognized the number from my own spreadsheet. I had originally thought it was an accounting error, because Graham had told me the property sale produced nothing worth discussing. The hearing was the next morning. Nina assembled the documents in a thin folder, then turned the first page face down. "This is not the whole secret," she said. "It is the part he thought we would never reach." I returned to the house on a Thursday afternoon to collect the rest of my clothes. Graham had already taken the furniture he wanted, leaving pale rectangles on the walls and a printer in the hallway that had not worked since spring. I carried a box from the bedroom to the kitchen, then noticed the printer tray was slightly open. Behind it was a folded sheet of paper, the Maple Ridge closing instructions. I recognized the title immediately. The page listed the sale proceeds and the destination account. Cedar Vale Holdings, ending in 4,421. The total transfer was $184,600. At the bottom, beneath the bank instructions, someone had written in black ink, "Keep separate until after filing." The handwriting looked like Graham's. Not the polished signature he used on contracts, but the narrow, impatient writing from grocery lists and notes left beside the thermostat. I stood there for less than a minute. Then I took 3 photographs, placed the page inside a clear sleeve, and put the original in the back of my document folder. I did not call Graham. I did not send Nina a message filled with accusations. I simply drove to her office and handed her the page. She studied it without touching the writing. "We'll have this authenticated," she said. I nodded. The house looked different when I left. Not emptier, more exact. The printer, the hallway cabinet, the loose tray where the page had waited, all of it had become part of a record. I had spent 11 years learning not to interrupt Graham. Now that habit was going to make him very easy to listen to. Graham testified that Cedar Vale Holdings belonged entirely to Owen and that he had no authority over its accounts. Nina asked him about the account ending in 4,421. "I may have been listed as an authorized signer," he said. "That doesn't mean I owned anything." She placed the Maple Ridge closing instructions on the evidence table. The notation at the bottom was visible through its protective sleeve. Graham leaned forward. Nina asked whether he'd handled the closing because Owen was recovering from surgery. "I helped with paperwork," he said. "Did you direct the proceeds?" "No." "Did you write the words, 'keep separate until after filing'?" Graham looked at the page for several seconds. "No." His answer was immediate, but not steady. Caleb Morris was called next. He had prepared the Cedar Vale records and arrived with a grey binder marked with the company's tax identification number. Nina asked him whether the $184,600 transfer had been recorded as a loan. "No," Caleb said. "It was booked as a distribution to Graham Ellison." Graham shifted in his chair. Caleb explained that the entry had been made 48 hours after the Maple Ridge closing and that the transaction code matched a marital property distribution, not an owner reimbursement. He did not sound pleased or accusatory. He sounded like a man reading numbers that had stopped belonging to him. Nina returned to Graham's affidavit, the one denying any interest in Cedar Vale or its accounts. Graham's attorney objected twice. Judge Whitaker overruled him twice. Then the judge looked down at Graham's affidavit, for 9 full seconds before asking Caleb to read one sentence aloud. Caleb read the sentence slowly. I have disclosed every account in which I hold an interest, whether individually or through an affiliated entity. The courtroom remained quiet. Nina introduced the original Maple Ridge closing instructions. The bank's authorization record was attached to the final page, along with Graham's employee identification number from the brokerage handling the sale. The number matched his personnel file. Graham's attorney argued that an employee identification number did not prove ownership. Nina agreed. She did not need it to prove ownership. She needed it to prove control. The transaction ledger was 9 pages long. On page 7, the $184,600 transfer carried a code used for marital property distributions. It had not been labeled a loan, reimbursement, or company expense. Judge Whitaker asked Caleb whether the account had been used to hold the funds separately until after the divorce filing. Caleb glanced at Graham before answering. Yes. Graham stopped smiling. The judge ordered the account frozen pending final distribution. She credited the full $184,600 against the share Graham had requested from the house and directed that the false affidavit be referred for review. No one raised their voice. Nina closed her folder. Owen stared at the floor. Caleb returned the grey binder to his lap. Graham turned toward me, but he did not speak. The ruling did not restore the years I had spent believing him. It did something narrower and more useful. It made the record accurate. Graham stopped smiling, but the part that stayed with me was quieter. He finally stopped calling me confused. The final settlement came 11 months after Graham filed. By then, the account had been frozen. The $184,600 had been credited against his requested share, and the court had ordered him to repay the legal costs created by the concealed transfer. He kept the brokerage accounts he had originally claimed were his. He did not keep the version of the marriage he had presented in court. I kept the house, not because it was a trophy. The mortgage was manageable on my salary, and I no longer had to borrow against my future to preserve someone else's comfort. Owen sent me a letter 2 weeks before closing. It was 3 paragraphs long. He acknowledged that Graham had used Cedarvale Holdings to receive the Maple Ridge proceeds and admitted he had not understood the full arrangement when he signed the account authorization. I read the letter once and placed it in the folder with the court records. I did not answer. At closing, the attorney slid the final documents across the table. I signed my name 4 times, each signature smaller than the last. No one applauded. There was only the quiet scratch of the pen and the soft movement of papers being stacked. When I returned home, the kitchen was empty. Sunlight fell across the counter where Graham had once left his keys, his receipts, and notes, telling me which things I had misunderstood. I placed the original Maple Ridge page in a fireproof box beside my passport and birth certificate. Then I closed the lid. The house was quiet after closing, but for the first time, the quiet belonged to me.